Are we?
Yes.
Where are we?
Here.
Why are we here? Not entirely clear. We are misfits thrust into existence by random chance, with no hints at all as to how we're supposed to make sense of it all. It's immensely bizarre. Here we are.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Here We Are podcast. Today, I'm at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I'm in the beautiful UT Gardens, talking with my guest today. Rebecca Trout Fryxell is joining me. Becky, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Shane.
Tell us about your background and what you do.
So I'm a medical veterinary entomologist here at the University of Tennessee, and that's a lot of words. But what it basically means is I study mosquitoes, ticks, and flies and the different pathogens that they may transmit to humans and non-human animals.
Okay. So how did you get into that? That's
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Not only are those really interesting insects, but they're really when you bring disease and pathogens into the equation, it's a very salient, interesting topic, and something that we all have to think about when we're at hikes or hanging out outside.
Yeah. So I will be honest and say that when I was little, I was not passionate about insects like most entomologists are. I didn't even know what an entomologist was. But I was an undergraduate student and living in Kentucky at the time when there were a bunch of horses that were dying. And we couldn't figure out what was happening. And they were always showing up on the news. And it just happened to be that a little caterpillar had a bacteria on the hair of it. And horses were consuming this caterpillar. And that caused basically an enhanced immune response, and a bunch of horses died because they were consuming caterpillars. And I just thought that was super wicked cool. And that was it. Shortly after that, West Nile virus started, and I was in.
Fascinating. It is. People that study viruses are always in such awe of viruses. I feel like people that are familiar with them are always just so fascinated with the workings of them. Most people hear about pathogens or something and they get very, very skittish about it. People that study pathogens, they seem to marvel at their interactions.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. And for me, it's that interaction between the pathogen and that arthropod, the mosquito, the tick, the fly, that, basically where coevolution have come together and allowed for a pathogen to be transmitted. So, there's some really I'm just going to say interesting studies, because I want to use adjectives like awesome and fascinating. But some really interesting studies that show, people infected with malaria are actually more attractive to mosquitoes that don't have the malaria pathogen. Whereas people who, right?
Whoa.
You see this, right? Where people who don't have malaria are more attractive to mosquitoes with malaria. So this idea of mosquitoes, ticks, flies, they are just, quote, just a vector, but they are the vehicle moving these different things around. And so that's what I like to study.
So, already have a question. So really cool that mosquitoes without malaria are attracted to people with malaria. I've never heard either of those parts, but that one makes a lot more sense to me than the mechanism of mosquitoes with malaria more attracted to, so I'm sure they'll also be attracted to whatever's around, but more attracted to people without malaria. Why would that one take place? Because you would think that what would the advantage for malaria be if it's inserted into someone that already has malaria? Is it the existing malaria would outcompete whatever new introduced malaria?
So not necessarily a competition side of things, but the gametocytes that are going through the circulatory system of the sick person, so basically the immature stages of the malaria protozoan, are causing the sick individual to sweat, increased mouth breathing, and carbon dioxide coming out. And so all of those things together are really attractive to that mosquito that doesn't have it. And so, all of these things come together, and that, the mosquito wants to find a human to feed on, just like the malaria protozoan wants to be picked up and transmitted.
So when someone has malaria, basically they're like, one of the factors is their kind of heat signature from their breath is easier for a mosquito to recognize.
Yeah. So those are some of the things I study here at UT. Not necessarily the behaviors like that, but looking at mosquito transmission of Crosse virus and trying to figure out why mosquitoes, here have something and over here don't. And so kind of more of those human animal health studies. Yeah.
Very cool. So first of all, you just informed me about, and now the audience about, a new pathogen to worry about for a lot of, do people, when you tell people about the Crosse virus, is that something most people would know about? I'd never heard of it before. Is it regional?
So the Crosse virus started in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is why it was.
That's where I'm from originally.
So now you know the name.
I know, but I'm from there, and I'd never heard of the La Crosse virus.
Yeah, and it, fortunately, and I hate to use these type of numbers, only affects, roughly 80 kids a year.
Okay.
In small areas of the country. And, most of them now happen to be in southern Appalachia. And so it doesn't make national news. It doesn't make, international news. And it rarely makes news here simply because it's an every year, this is what's going to happen and we're used to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I talk to the parents of the children who are sick with La Crosse, they've never heard of it before. And so it is a constant struggle trying to let people know about it and give them the power to protect themselves and basically not let them be afraid of it.
Okay, well, I want to learn. I want to learn everything about this virus from my hometown.
Yeah, so this virus was first found in the 60s in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It is transmitted by the eastern treehole mosquito, which is found basically across the entire eastern United States. So there's the eastern treehole mosquito, and you can guess where the mosquito lays its eggs.
And water in the Mississippi?
Nope, it's an eastern treehole mosquito.
Oh.
Sorry.
You're the middle schoolers you teach. I bet they get that one right a lot faster than I just did. No?
No.
Okay.
People on the spot have a hard time. Sorry about that.
I love it.
Entomologists are very simple. We don't want to complicate anything.
Yeah, I love it.
Because
it's usually some crazy Latin word of a puzzle of a fancy sounding thing that.
Yes.
Okay. It's literally in the tree holes.
So these mosquitoes, eastern treehole mosquitoes, lay their eggs in tree holes of, like, say, oak trees or something where a branch has fallen off and it's created this little hole where water collects. They lay their eggs in there and then they develop into adults. They fly out and they'll feed on some kind of squirrel or chipmunk in the area, some cute fuzzy little creature with insanely sharp claws and nails and things. And they'll pick up the virus potentially from that reservoir, from that host, where they can then potentially transmit it to a human nearby. So they don't fly very far. They're very close. The neat thing about this virus, and I say this as an entomologist, I find this really neat.
Right. Not as someone who's had to talk to parents.
Not as a mom, not as anybody.
We got you.
This mosquito can transmit the virus vertically. So it can go from the female to all of her offspring. And so that means in this scenario, when those larvae developing in the tree hole come out, they can be actually transmitting the virus as adults on the first bite.
How many mosquitoes are you getting out of in a batch generally? Like thousands, right?
So it totally varies, and it varies by competition and who's laying their eggs together, and that's other stuff we're looking at in the lab. But I'd say probably 20 to 50 mosquitoes coming out per tree hole.
I pictured thousands.
But they're all are strategists. So these mosquitoes lay a bunch of eggs.
Okay.
But not all of them are going to make it to adulthood.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the few good things, I will say. If all mosquitoes made it to an adulthood, we would be in trouble. More trouble. Yeah.
We would not be able to see each other right now through all of the mosquitoes.
Yeah, probably. So there's this one mosquito, and it's kind of always just been in this this cycle for a long time. Since then, it's been found in other areas like here in eastern Tennessee, and we've actually found it in 2 other mosquito species as well. The Asian tiger mosquito, the one that most people are very familiar with. It's got little black and white markings on it and a white stripe on its thorax or on its back. That can also transmit it. And then another mosquito, the bush mosquito, which can transmit it as well. So we have like 3 vectors, vertical transmission happening, but none of these mosquitoes fly really far. And so
that's the reason why we're safe is they don't fly very far. So what question to start with? You just made 10 questions shoot through my mind. Okay, so I guess first of all, let's get people interested. What's this thing do if you are a human and you get it? Let's start with that and then work our way back.
So it depends on who you are. And that's like this kind of the hard part about this. If you are an immunocompromised individual or a kid under the age of 15, your immune system will get shocked. So a virus will get into your body, and what I've noticed from interacting with parents and reading the literature is that the younger the kid is, the child, the worse it can be. And so the virus gets into the nervous system. It causes brain swelling. So encephalitis occurs. There could be seizures. There could be, typically it starts with a fever. But if it's really bad and that virus replicates, seizures, going to the hospital, spinal taps, all sorts of nasty things.
Yeah, I mean, encephalitis. I mean, there's not a whole lot of treatment for. There's not a lot of stuff you can get crossing the blood-brain barrier, is my understanding.
Yeah,
right?
It shouldn't. That's why there's a barrier.
Right,
These viruses should not be doing this. So yeah, it gets across and it causes that. And then what we're noticing is children who recover also have cognitive disorders that kind of happening with some of them. It's not all of them, but it could happen. We've seen individuals with ADHD. I've spoken with a parent whose child was diagnosed around the age of 11, 12. And then later on, when the child turned 16, super excited to get their driver's license and stuff. But the parent was like, there's no way, he's going to be able to drive because he's still having cognitive problems. So this is something that we're still learning about and still need to study, primarily because we need to stop it and at the same time educate people about how to prevent it.
So when you say there's 80 cases a year.
Yeah, 60 to 80 a year.
How are they diagnosing this? I mean, the thought occurs to me, like, is that just the confirmed cases? You would think that there would be a good number of unconfirmed cases or misdiagnoses or something.
This is something we talk about a lot in the lab. So we know about the cases that make it to the hospital with some kind of Crosse neuroinvasive disease, so a neuroinvasive symptom. We don't know about people who didn't make it to the hospital, primarily probably because of health insurance or misdiagnosed with the flu at home, summertime illness type of thing. But diagnosis for those individuals who have the symptoms, goodness, it's spinal tap, it's testing for herpes, meningitis, and other things that could cause the encephalitis as well. But the samples typically get sent to a state lab and often take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks for confirmation to occur.
Wow.
And so a parent is sitting there in the hospital with their child who's very sick. And that parent is very upset because they want an answer and they want a solution. And the doctors are equally frustrated because they want to help that kid.
Right. 2 to 3 weeks from the lab?
It seems that way.
Wow.
And one of the small things that we talk about is, with everything that happened with COVID, can some of those diagnostic tests get flipped for lacrosse? Can we take some of those solutions that happened very quickly and use them for some of these other endemic neglected diseases?
Right. All of everything that we did, throwing the spaghetti against the wall and all of the resources and that
some of the antivirals that were identified and worked, could they work for lacrosse and the other viruses as well?
Right. Including getting more rapid testing, hopefully.
Yes.
So Oh, all right. So that's what happens when you get it is just an actual nightmare. There's
yeah, I hate it. It's not funny and it's hard.
Well, there's. I mean, you laugh to because what else are you gonna do?
No, it's exactly
like the tension creates a need for some sort of a release valve.
Yeah.
But what about treating? Because back to the trouble with the blood-brain barrier, you mentioned spinal tap. Because it's my understanding that medicine doesn't, like very few medicines outside of maybe like psychoactive things or something like that cross the blood-brain barrier. Yeah. So what kind of treatment is available for?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not familiar with many things except for treating symptoms. So trying to bring fevers down, trying to calm the individual. I've spoken with some parents where the child is put kind of like into an induced coma, things like that to help the rest of the immune system really kind of pick up and work. It's hard, and it is one of those extremely frustrating things. And so just trying to rearrange how we think about it, how we think about this virus and how we approach it is what we're having to do now. Yeah. All
right. So back to the mosquitoes and the vectors. So first, there's 3 species that are known to carry it.
Yeah.
Why? So, do you have any idea how many species of mosquitoes just like exist?
There may or may not be new ones kind of being discovered all the time.
Right. Of course.
And so we're going to go with around 5,200 is the number. That we say.
It must be fun to who's discovering new mosquitoes? What a tedious job. To see a mosquito and
job though. Yeah.
Oh, of course it's an important job, but to have a mosquito land on you and be like, that doesn't look familiar. That doesn't look like other mosquitoes that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of mosquitoes. And it's like, are there people like bird watchers that catalog that
some of the really, really good ones. And I don't want to just say different laboratories, but the Walter Reed hospital, the institution there, they have some of the best taxonomists looking at new mosquito species and trying to figure out what's there. There's taxonomists. There's actually this is really funny. There's people who fight about the name of a mosquito and whether or not it should be one species or another species, and do we lump them together or different genera. But really what it comes down to, in my opinion, is we need to be able to know what to call it based upon what it's doing. So it could be like a new biotype or a new species, but if we
you don't get to just call it, if you discover it, you don't get to.
Oh, some people do. Some people.
Okay, what would you? Yeah, no, you wouldn't call it after you.
Oh no! People wouldn't be able to say it. Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah. No,
because I'd be tempted to call something like a Shane Mosquito or something.
Yeah, Beyonce, Gary Larson, the comic writer. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. He has a many insects named after him, and so most of the time, when an insect,
a person I've never heard of who
Gary Larson's pretty famous. Yeah.
Well,
Farside comics and things.
Oh, Farside. So he has many insects named after him.
Yes, Larsonii is a very common species name. Yeah, a lot of people will name it after their spouses, or normally you name something in honor of somebody. So I had a colleague I was working with who identified a new, rediscovered would be the right way to put it, rediscovered a species of fly that everybody thought was kind of like this one fly species. And he was like, no, this one is indeed different. And we confirmed that it was indeed different. And he wanted to name it after his master's advisor, but we couldn't do that. But so maybe another one will be there.
I think if I discovered just the worst mosquito ever, a really horrifying mosquito, is there ever someone names a mosquito after their ex or something like that?
Oh, I think that happens probably a lot. Yeah. I can imagine that happens a lot.
There has to be some spite naming.
There's in the entomology drama world. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I bring this up not just because it's fun and entertaining. We got 5,200 mosquitoes, 3 of them carrying this. Is that just because there's like mostly, are these just the 3 most abundant in the area that La Crosse is, or is the La Crosse virus just not compatible with other species? I guess I didn't know there was so much variance within mosquito. Like if you try to give the La Crosse virus to the other 5,200 mosquitoes, is it just not going to be able to carry?
Yeah. So this is where we get into the idea of transmission. So the other mosquitoes can very likely acquire it from that same host, so that infected squirrel with La Crosse, but they might not be able to transmit it. So that virus has to make its way, from the mouth parts down into the gut, out of the gut. It's got to escape the gut, make it to the salivary glands, and wait to be basically transmitted with the spit of the mosquito.
And this is why viruses are so fascinating, because you're like the journey that they have to take to do this, to get to the thing,
exactly.
to go, how?
So that's like the vector-borne disease part, right? Like, how in the world is this virus surviving the immune system of a mosquito, the immune system of the squirrel and the chipmunk and other things, and then the immune system of the human as well. So like, if we can figure that out, that would be
You think they just like read a lot of self-help books or something and believe in themselves?
Absolutely.
They probably
use
just manifest
their little,
it.
like, I don't know what virus parts are, but like little parts of their viruses to.
You just got to believe in yourself if you're a virus.
Maybe they use us to figure it out. When we learn about things, they like take from it.
They're tapping into our knowledge system through some sort of quantum this and that is yet to be understood.
Yeah, you think about some of those pathogens that change human behavior.
yeah.
Maybe those individuals don't wear repellent anymore. I know that's morbid. I'm sorry.
Oh no, don't be. I love a little. We've just had Halloween at the time of recording this, so it's fun to get a little morbid. So first of all, how do you land on studying the La Crosse virus? So you get into this area of studying pathogens and various interactions between say like insect vectors and human and mammal interactions. What makes you land on? Do they just, you say this is what I want to do, and then they go, well, we need someone on this, we need another person on this. Here, you take La Crosse. Is it
kind of a sad story?
I love a good sad story. If you make me cry, you win. You win. I don't know what you win, but I'm going to be excited.
Man. Hopefully funding, right? A donor will donate to the program. That's what we would win. So when I moved to Tennessee, I knew about La Crosse, but I was one of those individuals who kind of neglected it as well. It was in our textbooks, it was on our exams, and it wasn't as important to me. I was working on other things like malaria, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, avian malaria, things like that were more fascinating to me at the time. But when I came here, I start with my research program in 2012, and the summer of 2012, I get a phone call from the Tennessee Department of Health asking me.
This is going to get so sad, isn't it?
There's nothing.
Oh, you might win the prize, though.
Please donate. We need help. But yes, I get a phone call from the health department that a child passed away from La Crosse. And the health department asked if I could go to the home and collect mosquitoes and do a thorough investigation, because they were actually able to, and I use the family allowed for an autopsy to occur. And so the brain of the child was sent to the Centers for Disease Control, and it was confirmed to have La Crosse. So roughly 60 days after the bite occurred, that initial infection, I went to the property and, set up mosquito traps everywhere around the property, at other people's places. I was driving around with my in-laws trying to find places to set up traps, because we really wanted to find this virus in the mosquitoes, and we found it. And so that basically meant that I sat down with the rest of my research program, the students in the lab and my technician, and said, we need to redirect a little bit of resources to this, so that we can constantly be aware of it and be there, so we can respond. There could be one child in the hospital, and the rest of the family is at home with other siblings, and so we'll show up with things like Tennessee football gear, and everybody loves a Tennessee football shirt here in Tennessee. And so throw it at them to put that on. So they're wearing their clothing and doing what they can. And we do source reduction cleanup. So, if there's water around the property, we teach them how to do all of this. And so really trying to make sure that a little bit of education, for these individuals can go a really long way, because ideally they're going to be our champions. They're going to be telling people out in the community, that this virus is here and we need to be protecting the rest of the kids as well.
I know, like malaria happens, you go like, well, let's drain all the pools around here and say, what do you start, if we start seeing the Crosse virus, what are we going to drain the tree holes? How?
So I really smile at this because my student found one manuscript that showed that if they put sand in all of the tree holes, it reduced the mosquito population and stopped virus transmission.
We got to sand the tree holes?
We just need to look for, now how do we get to the tree holes, right? And so this is where the next line of research really needs to go into, is identifying these sites where vertical transmission is happening, where the mommy mosquito is giving it to the baby mosquitoes, and then stopping that line of transmission. I know.
Well, it seems challenging.
It is, but I think it's going to be fun, because I think this is a solvable problem. I really do.
Say I love climbing trees.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. So you just put the word out there, like, hey, any tree climbers out there, when you're out and about doing your regular run-of-the-mill daily tree climbing, as I do,
mm-hmm.
keep an eye out for tree holes, and if you see one, throw some sand in it.
So that is one way that they could do it. That would be pretty hard. It'd be pretty fun too, I would think. I could think of some students who would love to do that.
Oh, you'd get sued immediately. Someone would fall out. You wouldn't. Be like, I was climbing that tree in the interest of public health. The University of Tennessee told me to climb that tree.
Yeah. And so that is one thing that somebody could do. But the other thing that we really push for is source reduction. And so removing standing water around a property. That could be water that's held right there in a tire, water that's held in a kid's toy or a tire swing, flower pots, all of those places where we as in like the greater, we talk to people about, if you want to get rid of mosquitoes that are biting you, you need to remove the place where they're growing up, where mosquitoes are laying their eggs. So that's one thing that I think is a very doable solution. It takes time and it takes work to do that. But I think if we're doing it for kids, I think it makes a ton of sense. The other things that we can do is add, let's say there's a spot where we can't get to, like a tree hole. We can put insecticide up there and a larvicide and get that up there. And I think there's a lot of solutions that are available that just haven't been tested for La Crosse.
Okay. And because there's only so many resources and a million problems to solve in life generally, but also within the world of infectious disease. And so hopefully this is an excellent time with all of the innovations that have happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it will just take, me and some undergrads, grad students, some of the middle school and high school students I've told you about, working together. Eventually those kids are going to become adults living in the area. They'll be aware. And then partnerships at other institutions. I work really closely with Western Carolina University. They have quite a few cases in that area. And so we kind of are trying to piggyback work with one another, so that we use our resources really effectively, I think.
So started in La Crosse. This was discovered in the 60s. Yeah,
so everybody was working on La Crosse for the longest time.
Okay,
that was when we talked
because people when a new pathogen hits the market, people don't know if it's going to blow up and everyone in the world's going to get this new thing. Some
of the best entomologists at the time were graduating out of Notre Dame. And so, Notre Dame had some, and still does have some fantastic entomologists working on infectious diseases, mosquito-borne viruses and pathogens. And so a lot of people in that area, real close to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and that spot, we're studying it and testing it. It has since The cases have really kind of shifted, though, to southern Appalachia, where we don't have as many entomologists working in the area.
How did it, let's see, so 60 years.
That's the $1 million question. Actually, probably $2 million question.
And these are slow moving things. 60 years is a whole lot of mosquito generations.
It's a whole lot of, yes.
So
there's some whispers wondering if it's always been here and it's just been missed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? So if you don't look for it, you don't know it's there, or you don't have a big outbreak. You don't know it's there.
Well, let me ask you what. So these, so you said squirrels.
Yeah.
Or what else?
Squirrels,
what other?
chipmunks, cute things that will run around at a park.
Well, there's a lot of cute things all over the
Small creatures, small mammals.
Well, that's what I mean. Is if the mosquitoes may not be going very far, but what about the squirrels and chipmunks and stuff? Could that be?
They don't move very far either. And so it's very likely people moving the mosquitoes, or that they were already here. And so we know that the Asian tiger mosquito and the bush mosquito, are not from the United States. They're not native to here. And they were accidentally introduced to the country and have just since taken over.
This is good terrain for it. It didn't have. Was it just?
So it was just people importing things like tires. So some of the mosquitoes had already been laid their eggs in the tires, and tires came in from Asia, and then those tires just moved around. Mosquitoes hatched and took over.
The ecosystem here was such that it was very favorable for.
Yeah, and it is really favorable. I mean, you look around just where we are, it's beautiful in East Tennessee. We have hardwoods aplenty. We have a bunch of squirrels and chipmunks and a lot of places for these mosquitoes to develop. And I'll even add the terrain, the elevation, the geographic features also kind of make this area pretty unique to places for water to just kind of get and these mosquitoes to develop.
So maybe the Crosse virus was spread much further than just La Crosse, and it wasn't until more information and awareness got out there that it became more readily diagnosed in areas and tracked down. And I imagine probably the circumference of the area of doctors that are knowledgeable on the subject to diagnose it probably shifts with it probably doesn't just every doctor in the country gets up to speed on the Crosse virus. It's probably on a kind of need to know.
You're totally right. So in the early 2000s, there were a bunch of kids in East Tennessee that became sick with a virus of unknown origin. Doctors didn't know what was happening. They presented to East Tennessee Children's Hospital, and the CDC came and confirmed that it was La Crosse. And so, there is this combination of, knowledge, having doctors know, what's available and what's out there. And when I say what's out there, what are the viruses that are currently circulating at the time? And so we wouldn't be thinking about La Crosse in the wintertime, just like we wouldn't be thinking about, I don't know, insert other virus in the summertime.
I said frostbite. Right. Okay. So it's been being studied since the 60s, where we threw lots of attention and time and resources on it, because who knows what's going to happen with any new pathogen. And so it was tracked, and I imagine we have samples and stuff from that time. Has the virus itself been evolving much over the last 60 years?
That's the next, that's a really good question, because those are some studies that we want to look at. Look at virus evolution within the mosquitoes, see what's happening. We do know there's different strains of La Crosse virus that have been identified. So strains, just like, different serotypes or genotypes, whatever we want to call it. But we know that there's one that just seems to be a whole lot worse when it gets into kids, when it gets into people, compared to other ones that are just out in nature and haven't spilled over, I guess would be a way to think of it.
So we all have a zillion different priorities in life. Some people here are like, well, only 80 kids, whatever, obviously you'd never say that to the parents, but maybe if you're looking at statistics and figuring out and comparing it against, COVID, the flu, heart disease, car accidents, whatever else, it might fall off a lot of people's radar. I was certainly unaware of it. What kinds of things has researching the Crosse virus, maybe just from your own work, but also through the decades, what sort of things can we learn and glean from studying, like using the Crosse virus as a case study?
Yeah, or like a model system.
As a model system that can be applied to other issues that we face.
Yeah, so understanding Crosse virus, we'll get down to, oh goodness. So I'm not really a virologist, so I'm going to throw that out there. But understanding how different genotypes of viruses or different strains of viruses survive in different mammals and vector species. When I think about it as an entomologist, I like to look at it as, what are these mosquitoes doing in the immature stages when they're together in the tree hole or the cup in someone's backyard? Are they interacting with one another? Does that lead to competition or not? How are these mosquitoes surviving? I guess are those things that are really kind of more really exciting to me. Yeah. And then the other bit is, I think it creates a little bit of community awareness in our area. And so for me, I've been using the Crosse virus as a way to teach students about entomology and the importance of becoming an entomologist, so that, if we're working with 80 kids who are getting sick with La Crosse, we do need to recognize that 250,000 kids die of malaria every year. And so, those numbers are extremely different. But if you're helping those kids with La Crosse, we can also be transferring those studies over to kids who might have malaria.
So you do a lot of public communication. You visit like middle schools you were just mentioning. What's some of the other research and work in public communication that you do? So
I really feel, and I'm going to make assumptions, you might be feeling the same way, which is why you're here, that we do science so that it doesn't stay in a journal on a bookshelf.
Yeah.
We do science to make a difference. And so I run a program called Megabytes, Medical Entomology, Geospatial Analyses. We basically teach teachers about entomology and how to do mosquito surveillance. And we work with their classrooms to help do this mosquito surveillance so that we have more data in East Tennessee. The students are doing engaged learning, and they're not just sitting in a classroom. They're going outside and interested in entomology, and at least hearing about the word entomology. And so then we get their egg papers back, and my students get to include that stuff into their PhD dissertations or master's thesis to really figure out why here and not there. As a part of that, we do bring in science communication. So we ask the students in the classroom, those middle school and high school students, to create a poster and to talk about, what they did and what they learned, so that, they're not just doing, they're reflecting and then talking about it and sharing the message with others. And, ideally, they're going to talk to their family members or guardians about mosquitoes and La Crosse virus and get that word out. And then, some of the students will stay in East Tennessee, become adults and have families in the area. And then they'll be aware as well. And so it's kind of this, with La Crosse virus, I really feel like it could be a sprint, but it is a marathon trying to get that information out. And so, yeah, that's some of the stuff we do with science communication. We had one group of students actually do a podcast and submit it to the NPR podcast challenge. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Not.
Yeah, but these middle schoolers sat down and developed a little podcast, and it was absolutely precious. And they talked about mosquitoes and entomology and how they transmit pathogens, put sound to it, and spread it. Yeah, it was pretty fun. Yeah.
And what other kind of viruses and disease spread in insects do you study?
Yeah, so the mosquitoes is kind of like one arm, and then the other arm is a lot of tick-borne pathogens in the area. So right now we're working with the Asian longhorn tick that's relatively new to the United States and transmitting a pathogen and killing cattle, and it's a completely different audience when you're working with cattle producers and stakeholders than it is when you're working with a parent of a sick child, and you're just kind of jumping from one form of communication to another arthropod system, and trying to figure out what's happening there. And then some other things too, working with flies that, transmit bacteria to cattle and other things too.
So how can you talk a little bit about the One Health initiative?
Yeah. So I'm one of the One Health Initiative fellows, I believe is what it's called, or scholar. And really what I do, I feel like is the best. Okay. So I know everybody probably feels they're the best example when it comes to One Health. But what I do is, something growing up in the environment is getting infected and bothering or transmitting a pathogen to a human or an animal, non-human animal. Those animals are moving things around and potentially affecting other things. And we get all the way down into the weeds, to be honest. If we manage a pasture, we can control ticks. If we manage the environment. So it's really social, economic behaviors, what trees are in an area are affecting mosquitoes, what trees have fallen down and died from a fungal pathogen, could create an area for a small mammal to grow and, hold ticks and things. And so it's really, in my opinion, One Health at the most narrow spot.
Yeah, just very, very interdisciplinary. What about some of the more modern issues that come with biodiversity loss, and I would say probably more impactful habitat loss that's kind of forcing a lot of these small critters into smaller and smaller spaces, and viruses kind of loving things in confined spaces.
Probably one of the best examples has been Lyme disease, where you have a bunch of communities developing into forested places where ticks were. And now we're living there, and those mice are running around, the deer are coming through, and those ticks are feeding on those animals out in quote nature or our backyard, and then transmitting that bacteria to us. So is that kind of what you were asking? Yeah. So that, I think about my yard in East Tennessee, and 10 years ago, we probably had 2 deer kind of moving around a bit, but now we have a lot of deer on where we live now. And there's discussion now about, hunting and, what should we do to kind of help control this, the deer population, because our tick population has just followed suit, would be a way to put it. Yeah.
And is this, do you see more potential for disease spread generally as there's kind of more as there's more transmission between mammals as different things are?
Yeah. So it's that idea of like, as we get closer.
Yeah, as
right?
we get kind of
it's really easy for my mosquito or my tick to make it from one to another. We think about lice and children in an elementary school or a daycare. If we bring them together inside, those louse are going to move back and forth.
It seems like there's potentially some more evolutionary opportunities for certain viruses as well, for some new variant of lacrosse or something to take off, and if some new cute species shows up that wasn't in the area before because it was crowded into the same space as everything else, and then it might be a new vector or potential host.
So competition could happen where, arthropod 1 was fine, arthropod 2 moves in, and maybe now the behavior of arthropod 1 changes over time. Becomes more aggressive, takes a longer blood meal, takes a quicker blood meal. Maybe the virus has to figure out how to get to the salivary glands faster so it could be transmitted. All of the things that we do at kind of like the macro level can very much affect that little micro tiny level. And we definitely see those changes at the genetic level much faster than we do at the phenotypic or what we see level.
Well, what about mosquito control? Say you figure out a way to alter the DNA in all of these mosquitoes. Some new work being done, and now what is it? They can only breed males or something like that, which kind of drives this. Drives the population numbers of a species or multiple species of mosquitoes way down, which is it seems like, and as far as humans are concerned, the less mosquitoes around, the better for us. But then does that have a cost within ecosystems as well?
So I get asked this question a lot, and I have to say that of the 5,200 mosquito species that are found around the world, there's probably 60 of them in Tennessee, and 5 of them are really bad. And so if we eliminated those 5, I don't think that there will be a collapse to an ecosystem anywhere. Things like bats and frogs and other creatures that do feed on mosquitoes.
We'll have plenty more to eat.
Right. There's something else for them. I mean, if there will be something, there'll be the other mosquitoes nearby.
Yeah.
So, some of this, the science that's out there right now and the stuff that people are doing are very specific, and they're targeting, right now it's really only targeting 2 mosquito species. The one that transmits malaria and the one that transmits yellow fever, dengue, and chikungunya and Zika and all these nasty viruses. So if it's, 2 mosquitoes get wiped from the earth, the downstream effects will be more human population, wildlife numbers probably increasing, things like that come with other problems.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. But,
I don't want to kill something just to kill it.
Right.
But if there is because a lot of people think,
we neuter pets and everything else. If we can start neutering mosquitoes, that sounds like a terrific solution to me. And it also doesn't, there's kind of this idea of like, it not letting nature take its course or something, whatever's natural. That's all like a weird philosophical argument that doesn't mean a whole lot at the end of the day anyway.
But I think I always go back to this idea of what's a pest. And I talk about it in my class, and I talk about how the idea of a pest can change. Too, right. So like a pest is something that's a nuisance or a bother and more. And so a pest that is transmitting something in an area, in my opinion, should be controlled. But if it's just chilling and not doing anything wrong, I have no problem with letting it be. And so a lot of the public health districts and mosquito abatement districts and other people who do the control wait to do sprays or anything like that until there's an actual transmission or problem happening.
So what about tick prevention? What kinds of information do you try to get out there to the public?
Yeah, so when it comes to tick prevention, we have a lot to learn. And so what we're doing right now is transferring the ideas that we know from mosquito bite prevention to tick prevention as well. So, wearing repellent, wearing clothing that will make it easy to find the tick and remove it, or something that will kill the tick. So like 𝕊𝕙𝕒 and treated clothing, things like that. But some of the work coming out of my lab fairly soon, we're excited about, is looking at habitat management. So how do we change that environment just enough so that, the wildlife that has a bunch of ticks on it aren't running through that pasture, going through this one forested area. And also making those like data-driven decisions where, if there's humans in this area, that's where we need to do a controlled burn or something like that, versus another area where there's no risk at all, just leaving it be and letting, like we said earlier, nature take its course. So there's still a lot to learn, but most of it is personal protection, along with preventing wildlife into what you would consider being a safe area or a tick-free area. Safer area. There's no such thing as a safe area. Yeah.
If I'm going to get into hiking around here, maybe
you should
cut all this hair off and just wear white spandex, maybe.
Oh no, you would die from heat exhaustion.
Oh, okay.
Heat stress would ruin it.
I keep on trying to find a reason to wear
the Tyvek
suit. Just a pure white spandex
so my colleagues in the Northeast and in the upper Midwest, they do go out when they do their tick collection in their straight up white suits. Now I can't send my students out like that because of many reasons, one being heat stress.
The other is bullying.
No, nobody seems to bully them because they have ticks. Nobody wants to
Right.
Yeah.
You don't mess with the tick person.
You don't mess with the tick person. Typically, people are excited when we show up or concerned when we show up. But you do the smart things, right? You'll put your hair up and you can put it in a little man bun or something like that and keep it up. Okay. You would tuck your shirt in and you would probably wear some really cool socks that are long, some like tube-like socks, and tuck your pants in there. If you were in an area where you know that there's ticks and or pathogens that they transmit. And so that's some of the stuff that we're trying to figure out is, where are people encountering ticks? Can we describe that habitat so that if you were to go out, you can make that informed decision? And you don't have to do it all the time, right? So it could be, ticks are here now, but not there later on when you want to go. So
could there be kind of some systems in place that are similar to like fire warnings? Where
I absolutely hope that will happen one day. Yeah, I would love to see, you're going out to an area and it's like, hey, this is a, like jellyfish are coming out, right? When you think about the ocean, there's a jellyfish warning. Lots of ticks are being reported right now. Later on, hey, just be aware. We haven't had a lot of ticks, but still just be aware. You should never completely let your guard down, but just being aware is important.
Is there an app or anything like that that's been developed yet?
There is. So I believe, I can't remember what institution developed it, but there is a tick app and you can look up and see like when and where it's occurring. But it's, a lot of that information is crowdsourced. So it's, people saying, I've seen it and here's where it is. What we're doing is we're partnering with the Forest Service. And so the Forest Service, they go out into the forest all the time. It's by the job. And they get ticks on them kind of as a hazard with their job. They send those ticks to us. We identify them, screen them for different pathogens. And so now we're really looking at developing these models to, not just go by the public of what they're seeing, but also use data to map and create calendars of when they're going to be there. And a lot of the tick app stuff is, I think, more kind of northern in focus. There's a lot to learn in the Southeast, I will say.
Great. Yeah. Well, so if there's, say you're really able to, get a lot more resources. Every listener is going to start. Where are they going to donate if they want to help fund, if they want to be a donor or something? Where would people go?
So if they're interested in donating in the Megabytes program, where we work with the teachers and do a lot of lacrosse research, they can go to megabytes.org, megabytes.org, or the UT Foundation. We have places. I say they have it all figured out on like kind of how to narrow the money down to vector-borne diseases, or even how to, if you want to think grander, how to donate to the One Health Institute or initiative. Apologies.
So say science. This is for me when science is at its best is when it can solve all these problems. Is when it can be on the preventative side, and you said there's things within. Habitat that can be changed that the average person is just never even going to be privy to. They're never even going to be aware of the things that have been managed within, say, the habitat to reduce mosquito or tick populations or something. They don't even need to think about it or know the counterfactuals that could have happened to a parallel universe where no one does anything about anything. And you get people into the people aren't ever going to have to experience the horrifying multiverse where no one cares about science. Can you imagine a culture where people don't care about science?
I don't want to think about that culture.
But what happens when science is at its best and it manages all these problems, and then people don't have to confront or see the problems because of all of this preventative maintenance. It's like you go, if you get your car maintenance regularly and you're regularly getting the oil changes and the recommended spark plugs and everything else, and there's just never, you go 200,000 miles with your car and there was never a problem, you go, well, I just wasted all that money on all of those oil changes and fixing this
doesn't
and that.
Sound like a horrible problem. No, and I do think that preventative science, oh man, I wish we had more of it. I wish we had.
Me too.
It's, the goal is to prevent problems and to not react to problems.
Right.
And oftentimes I feel like I show up to a site
Too late.
reacting to a problem.
Yeah.
So we are
Right.
trying to change it. And I do think people are, I'm an optimist, so I do think people are becoming more aware and informed, self-informed mostly, of what's happening. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, except I don't want to think about that world where people don't care about science. And I'm doing my best in my small part, here in East Tennessee, going into middle school and high school classrooms, going to a farm, going to livestock auctions, going to different places and talking about the work that I do. Because if I don't, what's the point? Right? If I can't share the work that I do, what's the point? And I really look at this as taxpayer dollars and, this is them needing to learn the importance of it.
Fantastic. So one more time, if people want to learn more about what you do, where would you like to direct them?
I have no idea.
Well, you're
So if you wanna
the
learn
various
more about-
organizations that you work.
So to learn more about the Crosse Virus and the work that we do in middle school and high school classrooms, and I shouldn't say just we work with them; they're a part of the team. You can go to megabytes.org, MEGABITESS. There's two. .org, or even just the University of Tennessee One Health Initiative. There's a lot of information there that I do and some of my colleagues do that is preventative problems. The goal is not to just react to them, but to prevent those bad things from happening in the first place.
Wonderful. And if you want to support, one, there's going to be links within the description and everything, but if you also want to support what I do, which is trying to get the word out about science as much as possible, patreon.com/Shane Mauss. And thank you so much, Becky, for joining me. This has been terrific.
Thank you for having me. And again, science communication is extremely important. If we can't talk about it, what's the point?
Absolutely. I am in agreement. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I hope you get a chance to take some of these conversations and spread them as well.
Make them viral.
Make virus information viral. Thank you, listeners, for being such wonderful, curious people. We'll talk with you next week.